I must say that I don't see my presentation as a report or as a scientific presentation. It's rather an attempt to share some observations about the Soviet times restrikes of the imperial coins. We made an emphasis on the 20s, although they were made up to the 70s of the 20th century. Maybe even later. We have some data, and by the way, Nikita Moiseyenko, present here, knows the archives of St. Petersburg Mint and may add to what I say. At the very beginning, I would try to single out one group of Novodels. The Novodels, or restrikes, is a coin which is minted using the original tool at the mint, but not at the time when the main coinage, or main mintage was made. We're only talking about these types of restrikes that use the original stamp. Such mintage could not really be effected in Moscow because it only opened in 1942 and there were no tools remaining from the pre-revolutionary times, so we're only talking about St. Petersburg Mint, or as it was then called, Petrograd Mint and then Leningrad Mint, starting with 1924. When could such restrikes be made in the Soviet times? We're talking about proper restrikes because when imperial coins were manufactured during the Soviet times, when all the political life in the country changed, those coins were seen as relics of the pre-revolutionary times, so we must somehow study them from a different position. So when could such restrike be made? The first situation is related to the fact that in the 20s, or in 1920, in April, the Far Eastern Republic was formed. The Far Eastern Republic was a buffer country that was part of the former Russian Empire, or this is not like the modern buffer states in Ukraine, but because they are from the territory of another country. But as for the Far Eastern Republic, to successfully counter the Japanese aggression and to avoid the collision between the Soviet Russia and Japan as such, we needed a buffer state which would prevent the intervention into the Far East without involving Russia. It was a time when the Civil War was coming to an end, when in the central Russia, the Bolsheviks have already asserted their power, but fighting still went on in the Far East. The Far Eastern Republic was set up by the order of the Communist Party and of the Far Eastern Committee of the party remained part of the Bolshevik Party, but formally it was an independent state. This independent state did not have any precious metals to provide for its monetary emission, so it needed to create such a reserve of gold, of precious metals. That meant that the precious metals that were not in the hands of the White Guards were to be sent to the Far Eastern Republic. They were to be sent there from other parts of Russia, because even the bank was non-existent and all the valuables were at the disposals of the local Soviets. You know, it was the policy of military communism. There was no state budget, and the valuables just belonged to local authorities. So, in order to create such a reserve, such points were restruck. We can certainly speak about one coin like that, and there are other coins like that, like the rubles of, restruck rubles of 1915, and there are certainly restrikes. And probably some smaller denominations were restruck. The second reason was the issue of Russian Chervonets in 1925, and Marat Glezin wrote about that very much. I do not pretend it is my personal idea. You know very well that in the course of Sokolnikov reform, Russian Chervonets was minted in great numbers, but when they tried to use it in international transactions, the Western countries, the bourgeois countries, boycotted that coin. And it was clear, why should those capitalists accept coins which bore the slogan, proletarians of the world unite? So a large number of chervonets had to be remelted and to restrike pre-revolutionary money that could be used with foreign countries. The third reason for these strikes is the activity of the Soviet Association of Philatelists. You know very well that a Soviet Association of stamp collectors was set up, headed by Chuchin, and it was set up at the government level, and it was in charge of sales of all the collections existing in Russia abroad in order to fight to improve the situation of the vagabond children, and it existed for 4 years, and it was quite successful. It existed for 4 years, and it actually managed to develop trade relationships. But with the transition to planned economy, those alternative organizations, well, I won't be telling about its history, but it had an exclusive right of sales for currency, and it collected a lot of paper money during the Civil War that was not sold inside the country, and they did not sell the Soviet money abroad, but they only sold the White Guards money abroad. So it was called the Soviet Philately Association, and its task was not to sell numismatic coin, but rather postage stamps. And a lot of postage stamps of the times of the Civil War, including the territory, those from the territories of Armenia and Azerbaijan, were collected by that organization and then sold abroad, where the demand was pretty high. And also that association was dealt with the money that was confiscated from private persons and from private banks to everybody who wanted to buy. It issued magazine Soviet Collector and was quite successful before It was framed up in 1913. The management of that association was framed up because those were mostly Jews at the head of that organization, and they were accused of machinations. They were accused of issuing two post stamps with dirigibles which were sold inside the country at a speculative price and in very limited amount, and a special permission was needed to buy those stamps. That caused indignation, and in the long run the total management was fired, and actually they were very much threatened. One of the leaders of the organization was threatened to be sent to Gulag, and in the long run, all the trade in numismatic and icons was removed from that organization, and it stopped to exist. By the way, a very interesting situation existed in the country. The huge amount of coins which was on the books of that organization were sent to the Moscow Historical Museum, and probably the leadership of the museum got a proposal to buy out something, and I found in our internal archive a memo. I can't remember who wrote and to whom, and one of the employees of the numismatics department wrote to the director, wrote that the Soviet Association of Philatelists sells out the remaining collection and proposes to buy 2,500 coins from its main collection, plus the scales, and they are ready to transfer 70,000 coins, and then it was corrected to 100,000 coins. In 1938, they started transferring those coins, but it took a huge amount of time and effort, and this labor was interrupted by the war, and so the rest of that collection was formalized after the war, and as a result we don't know which coins came to the museum and when. And finally, the fourth issue is not related to the 1920s. I have some information that in 1970s party officials commissioned the Leningrad Mint to restamp some old coins, and because of that, the copper coin of 1917 is kind of suspicious. It arrived from a professor from Siberia, from Samara. They are in excellent condition, never touched by hands, and they are still kept in a private collection in Moscow. I happened to look at those coins very attentively, and also I looked at the very small amounts of the 1917 coins, 1 kopeck and 5 kopecks. In the museums, only 3 such coins exist actually, 2 in St. Petersburg and 1 with us. There was no doubt that all that mintage was minted with a real tool, with a real edge rolling machine, and it is not clear when they could have been minted. But I think that they may have been restruck, or maybe it's just a pattern series, but they are kept in a very different, Mikhail Smirnov sent me the pictures of those stamps, so that's a riddle that has to be solved. So the restrikes of the 1920s. You can see a banknote of the Far Eastern Republic, which, and you see it is written here that it is supported by all of the property of the Republic, but we shouldn't concentrate on the Far Eastern Republic only. There's also a whole story of money circulation in Mongolia in the first years, and payments in silver were quite common, and white paper money was not very willingly accepted by the population, so part of the coins restruck in Petrograd in 1920 could have been used in Mongolia to prepare for emission that was prepared by the Soviet government, and I think the money was printed in Petrograd, in St. Petersburg. But at the last moment, the Mongolian government refused from those banknotes printed in Soviet Russia. They refused to buy, and they printed their own money. And nowadays, the first Mongolian banknotes are extremely rare. And you only happen to meet them in the market by chance. But nevertheless, that was the situation. So I'm talking about the 1915 ruble. This is the edge of the 1 ruble degraded, and it is minted with the stamps that lost their relief. And you can see the position of the letters on the edge. You can see the wave here. The S is quite close to the rim, and the next letter is much higher than any other. And I will speak more about the Gangut ruble. Probably there are persons in this room who read an article about the restrikes of the Gangut ruble that in the latest edition of the Numismatics magazine. There was a good reason for this article, because it was the 100th anniversary of this coin, which is a rare coin, and Natalia, who is here in the Presidium, suggested that I express my ideas about this coin. I should say that I did it in a very simplistic way. Our collection has 55 pieces that came to the museum before 1955. I'll explain why before 1955. After the war, when it was necessary to make an inventory of the museum funds to understand what was lost, what was removed, a new instruction on accounting was introduced, and we had to make a new inventory of all the collection of over 1 million coins. And we did it well, actually, we dumped all the coins into one big heap. We selected them by countries, by epochs, and wrote a new inventory. Well, what happened to the coins? The sources of arrival for each piece was separated from the piece description. Of course, it was a barbarian method, but nothing else could have been done, because we were running out of time. The personnel or number covered a few people, and there were 1,000,000 coins, but we had to do what the government told us.
So, but we know that with our we have 55 Gangut rubles in our collection, just coming to the collection before 1955, two of them before the revolution. And so I took these 55 copies, pieces, and just took one Jubilee Romanov ruble of 1913, and also rubles of 1924 that was basically minted in 1926-27 when the Russian Philately Association came into being, and I tried to trace how the changes in the mint operations could affect the coins. So sometimes I find it in the internet, the person. I assure you that coins can be studied differently in many ways. So the products of the Leningrad Mint differs from St. Petersburg Royal Mint's quality. So despite the fact that Gangut rubles and other Novodels were struck by the pre-revolutionary authentic equipment, the quality of the product and the attitude to the production process in pre and after revolutionary time changed a little bit. So in Soviet times, the pre-revolutionary experts were just acting in their consultancy capacity, and as the party members played the first fiddle. And so the attitude to this process changed. So out of 55 items, only 2 have the unleveled just access of the edge inscription. So you can basically use this little coin die on the exhibition to see how it is done, so that the inscription on the edge would not be just done accurately. So the reason for that is the equipment which is not fully adjusted. So of course it was not handmade, it was done mechanically, but there are certain kind of screw bolts that have to be tightened in order for the inscription to be done in the right way. If these are loose, the quality will change. So we see it using the ruble of 1921 as an example. I didn't carry out any calculations. This out of 55 rubles of 1913, only 2 of them were leveled, and in 1 ruble of 1921, it is can be seen in 2 out of every 4, and just in ruble struck in 1924, almost every second ruble has the kind of an inaccurate inscription on the edge. Well, you can see just a vertical raised area on the edge near letter 4. Also using this kind of die at the exhibition, if you use it, you understand that once the blank was milled, it is further stamped, so it gets inside the 2 dies, the upper and the bottom dies, and it gets into the just printing core, and so this is the surface of the printing core that forms the edge inscription on the final version. So if some of the elements of these tools are loose or unjustified, it affects the quality. So sometimes the edge is like polished, and just it's very seldom that some abrasive effects you can find on it, because it leaves some dust, abrasive dust on the surface of the instrument, of the tools. Just this milling, just collar basically was just polished by steel equipment. So it's the this is the price list of the Russian Philately Association, 1928. So these are some of the fragments from the article that was recently published in Numismatics magazine. So the 3 Gangat rubles are listed here. First, 15 rubles for a mirror-like plate, the polished plate. 7 rubles, as far as I remember, or 7.57. And ordinary Gangat ruble is 5 rubles. So just compare it with 1.5 rubles of the Romanov ruble of 1913. So they knew the association very well. So the Jubilee Gangut 5 and 1.5 of Roman ruble. So even if it's best production, so the discrepancy was quite big. So this discrepancy was noted by Giuliano in 1960s, and he wrote about it. So these Gangat rubles, whatever were kind of in circulation, were restrikes and Novodels. Then all the authors, except for Uzdenichov, who found a ruble with one side polished and the other of ordinary production, and the picture was published in the same issue of the magazine. He wrote that in pre-revolutionary time such situations could not happen, because in the Soviet time even the Jubilee coins were issued in an off-the-cuff manner, because the attitude in general has changed. But all other Soviet Novodels, restrikes, are basically very much like the pre-revolutionary ones, except for this ruble. So I'm trying to study the attitude that changed, and just basically seeking to identify the features that will enable us to draw a line between the Novodel, the restrikes of the Soviet time, and authentic coins. So we need to carry out a serious research. However, just this collection of 55 rubles does provide us with good opportunity. Please raise your hand those who have more than 3 Gangat rubles in your collections, and just you understand that museum collection opportunity for studying coin material is much more extensive than the experience of people who just hold this ruble in their hands for a couple of times only. So you have to somehow take note of my comments and conclusions. So Soviet Philately Association accepted them in such kind of packets, and this was the selling price and the description. So there's a silver rupee, 1906 or whatever. So 1 kopek is the price, which is indicated at the bottom. This is the selling price, but this is the balance value. This, so the balance value was the one. So, just if we say that it was since 1920s, the coins mined was 2,500, you understand how many coins there were bought. And just 10,000 Eastern coins were bought after that. So this coin is from that collection. So, back to Gangut ruble. So we see the edge description of one of the just pieces of them. So one of them can be with such edge description and the others with inaccurate one. So just all the 55 rubles in our collection are not pre-revolutionary ones. The same you can see this kind of just polishing with a rough instrument. So here you can see some cuts. So when stamping, it didn't get have enough load, so there are marks left by perforator. So just as a blade, there is a blank, and just a puncture. So it was left on the Gangut ruble that we have in our collection. Of course, it testifies to the fact that it is not definitely a pre-revolutionary one.